I'm going to be your host today. I am a library marketing specialist at Sourcebooks. So I have my email here. If you have any follow-up questions after this presentation, feel free to email me. Your lovely librarians also have my email, so if you don't get it down now, you can ask them later. They can certainly get my email to you. Okay, so I've said it a couple times, Sourcebooks, and I'm sure your first question is, what is Sourcebooks? Well, Sourcebooks is where I work. It is a traditional publisher, which basically means we create books. You can see a tiny, tiny sample of the books we publish here on this slide. Everything from like Frida McFadden, Scarlett St. Clair, Lucy Score. We also published the best-selling How to Catch series in picture books. Fun note, we are the 6th largest publisher in the US, and we are actually #1 when it comes to romance, which is so much fun, and I love telling everyone that. We have some really great romance books. So we are a little different from other publishers you may have heard of, like Penguin Random House, Hachette, in that we are very entrepreneurial at our base. We are woman-led. We are the only publisher in the US that's a top 10 that is woman-led. And we do everything by our mission, which is books change lives, because we truly believe that the right book in the right person's hand can certainly make things better. So now that you know kind of what Sourcebooks is and what we do, I'm going to answer the question, what is publishing? What even is it? And basically the too long didn't read version of this answer is that publishing is an overarching statement that includes the creating of, the marketing, and selling of books to the public, to libraries, to bookstores, Target, Walmart, any airports, literally any place you can buy books. That is in our purview. The publishing industry is a $28 billion industry, and it is growing at a crazy, amazing pace, especially after the pandemic when a lot of people began picking up reading again. Also, we have to say like a big thanks to social media. Things like TikTok and Instagram have really boosted reading and book sales. And speaking of growing, there are 72,000 people who currently work in publishing. And I do like to say that there is room for more if you are ever interested in publishing. It is a great job path to have. I'm saying because, I'm a little biased. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. I am biased. I love books and I love publishing. So I'm going to take you kind of through how a book gets made. Keep in mind that this streamline is happening like 300 times. Each book that we are currently creating is in different stages, but this is basically the very simplified version. So first, to publish a book has to exist. So the first step is for an author to write a book. Once an author kind of writes a book, the author gets a literary agent. We'll go a little more into depth on this a little later when I talk about writing. And that agent takes the book and pitches them to publishers like Sourcebooks. If the publisher likes the book, they take it internally and they pitch it to their editorial team, aka the people who actually edit the books. And if those group of people decides that they want to take on the book, the editor can then send an offer to the agent and the author. And at that point, if the offer is accepted by the author, a contract is drawn up and signed by all parties. And these are just like the nitty-gritty details. How much money are you going to get paid is the big one, but also like how many are you going to keep your how are we going to sell the rights to your audiobook? Like, what happens if it goes international? All of those nitty-gritty details are all in that contract. And then once, of course, you get that legal stuff out of the way, the editor then takes the book and does what they do best. They edit the book. Um, and this can take as many times as needed per book. Every book is different, but typically an editor and an author will go through and edit a book in 2 to 5 rounds. And those rounds can be anything from, oh, we're just going to change this little part of the book, to a complete overhaul of the book. So it can take some time. Once that book is then ready, it now gets to be launched to the company. And basically, this signals everyone to start working. Copy editors are the people who go through the book and check for grammatical errors. They begin starting. The people who design what the page of a book looks like, and the front cover of the book, they begin their magic. The book is sent out in a manuscript form, just like a PDF or a Microsoft Word document, to other authors for possible blurbs. These blurbs come onto a book. You might see like Sarah J. Maas will talk about how amazing this book is on a book cover. Those are author blurbs. And the marketing team begins to create a marketing plan for the book. And publicity teams start working, and so much more. Everyone just has a green light, go. So that is this area. So one of the things that we do sometimes in this process is, as we get a little closer, the book becomes more finalized. The copy editors, make sure there's no grammatical errors, or as little grammatical errors as they possibly can. And that book gets finalized and then sent to a printer. To print a book can take anywhere from 2 to 8 months, but 4 to 6 months is the most typical when a book goes to a printer. Back in COVID times, it was a lot more. It was like 10 months to get a book printed. So you got to think about that when that process, as you're like trying to decide when you want that book to come out. So while the book is being printed, we don't just sit and twiddle our thumbs. We are working, we're ramping up promotions for the book ahead of times. We're creating presentations that go to our sales teams, who then take that book and they go to people like Target, Walmart, the libraries, Barnes and Noble, and they're like, hey, we have these great books coming out. And those partners then are like, okay, yeah, we want to take this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And then they are like, okay, we're going to take this many. This is going to be good for, Target. This book is going to be good for Barnes and Noble. And all of those particulars get decided. And then, of course, that is when they purchase books. Your libraries, your bookstores, they also purchase books a couple months out in advance of the book coming out. And then finally, the book is out in the wild. The book goes on sale. It shows up in your library. It shows up in the bookstore, in the Barnes and Noble, the Target, what have you. This entire process, this single slide, I say usually takes about 2 years to complete. That is without the time that the author spends writing the book. A lot of first-time authors can take, you hear stories about authors taking 10 years to complete a book, sometimes longer. And then this is added on to it. So we're working out really far in advance. There are some instances when books, this process is pushed through and is quite faster, but those are more rare. Typically, by the time you have a book in your hand, people have been working on it for about 2 years, which is crazy to think about. And I kind of have to like knock myself on the head sometimes doing that. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Okay. So you remember when I said at that part of the timeline that marketing starts to really ramp up, and they're promotions and those marketing teams of books, they start really talking about books. We are at that stage in the following books that Sourcebooks coming out shortly. So I want to kind of let you know about some of our really cool books that we have coming out shortly, and then we'll get into writing. These are books I'm really excited about. First is Axolotl and Axolitl. It is an axolotl themed, absolutely hilarious new read aloud. And it follows Axolotl and her younger brother Axolitl, who are total opposites. And sometimes their differences lead them to poke a little and to joke a little and then shout a lottle and pout a lottle. And can these two totally opposite siblings resolve their differences, apologize, and learn to play nicely together? And that's a beautiful picture book that's coming out in July. Down Syndrome Out Loud, I'm really excited for. It's an illustrated biography collection where you'll meet over 20 people with Down syndrome who have accomplished amazing things in their life, whether that's excelling in film, sports, business, photography. These people are changing hearts and minds about their disability. Plus, in this book, you get to learn about the Special Olympics, the Best Buddies, and other organizations who support the Down syndrome community. And this just is a great resource to both inspire young readers who have Down syndrome and their family members, but also friends, classmates, and teammates, and people who just want to learn more. Um, Next, I'm really, really excited about this book. It is a YA book. It's called His Face is the Sun. We like to pitch it as like ancient Egyptian Game of Thrones, but for YA readers. And it follows four strangers, a princess, a young priestess, a rebel, and a tomb robber, who are all ripped from their lives and thrown into a brewing war between the North and South lands of Egypt. So amid murder and betrayal, magic and monsters, gods and visions, love and war, these four unlikely heroes find themselves connected by a forgotten oracle that whispers insistently across the land. Only together they can save the kingdom from destruction, but when the bloodshed is done, who will be sitting on the throne? Ooh. Um, Beautiful White Fantasy. It's coming out in May. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm excited about all of these, okay? But Girls of Good Fortune is the new book from the best-selling author of Sold on a Monday, and it takes place in Oregon in 1888 amid the subterranean labyrinth of Portland's Shanghai tunnels. A woman awakens disoriented in an underground cell. She is no stranger to upholding a facade, being half Chinese yet passing as white during a time of rising hatred in America. She is perplexed, to say the least, by the male disguise she's wearing. Or the more pressing concern, however, that she has been stolen to be shanghaied, a sea-bound worker, into forced labor. So she wakes up. She is struggling to recall the twisting past that led to her kidnapping, from serving as a maid for a family of a dubious mayor to delving into the shocking case of a gold miners' massacre, ultimately luring her into the seedy dealings of those Shanghai tunnels. So she is desperately trying to escape to her younger daughter, left in a danger in a place where unearthed secrets can prove even more deadly than the dark recesses of Chinatown. I did not know about the Shanghai tunnels of Portland, and so this was such a very eye-opening read for me. Um, if you want just like a really, really good read, no one in our company has been able to stop talking about The Ghostwriter. It follows ghostwriter Olivia Dumont, who has spent her entire professional life hiding the fact that she is the only child of a legendary horror author, Vincent Taylor, famous not only for his horror novels, but for being the prime suspect in a brutal slaying of his older brother and younger sister in the 70s. Olivia is on the brink of financial ruin when she's called to ghostwrite her father's last book. She is poor, has no other jobs on the horizon, so she accepts, assuming it is her father's next horror novel. What she doesn't know, though, is that she will be forced to reckon with her father and the ghosts that live at the center of her family. Because after 50 years of silence, Vincent Taylor is finally ready to talk about that night in the 70s through a personal memoir that Olivia will now ghostwrite. The Fairbanks 4 is Central Park 5 meets Killers of the Flower Moon, if you like nonfiction. And it follows a trial that is ongoing in Fairbanks, Alaska. Late one night, a passerby finds a teenager unconscious, nearly beaten beyond recognition. 2 days later, he dies in the hospital. The police quickly arrest 4 suspects, all under the age of 21, and 3 of whom are Alaskan Native American. Police line up witnesses, they have trials, and all 4 men receive lengthy prison terms. Case closed, right? But journalist Brian Patrick O'Donoghue cannot put the story out of his mind. So when the opportunity arises to teach a class on investigative reporting at a college, he finally gets to dig into what happened to the Fairbanks 4. This then proceeds a relentless search for the truth as O'Donoghue and his students uncover lies, deceit, and prejudice behind the case that put 4 innocent young men in jail. This is the story of a collective action as one journalist, his students, and the Fairbanks Indigenous community challenge these incorrect, false verdicts. If you like something a little light and fun and something you can just wrap around you, A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic is going to be the best book for you. It takes place in the heart of Ardenshire, where elfish enchantments and dwarven delights rule, and human confectioner Arletta Starstone works twice as hard at perfecting her unique blend of baking and apothecary herbs. So when an orc neighbor secretly enters her creations into a prestigious elven baking battle, think Great British Bake Off, Arletta faces a dilemma. Being magicless, her participation in the competition could draw more scowls than smiles. And if Arletta wants to prove her talent and establish her culinary reputation, this human will need more than just pastry craft to sweeten the odds. While she is competing, she set off on a journey of mouth-watering pastries, self-discovery, heartwarming friendships, and romance, all while questioning whether the baking battle is winning the true prize or is it the adventure along the way? I love that one. This one is a little more suspenseful and creepy. If you like a locked room thriller, kind of like Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, How to Survive a Horror Story is going to be perfect for you. And this all takes place after a legendary horror author, Mortimer Queen, passes, and a group of authors find themselves invited to the last will and testament reading of the legendary icon. They're all expecting a piece of his massive fortune for themselves. They each have their own unique connection to the literary icon, some that are known, some that will be discovered, but they all want to have that chance to slip into the great author's shoes. So they enter this manor and they wait for their prize. Instead, they are invited to play a game. The rules are simple: solve the riddle and progress to the next room. If you don't, someone dies. Because each of these authors have something to hide, and Mortimer, even from the grave, always delivers the best story. Only this time, his manner will help. If you are a romance lover like I am, Story of My Life is the first in an all-new Laugh Out Loud romance series from Lucy Score. This book is Gilmore Girls meets Schitt's Creek in a fictional small town you want to move to after reading. I know I do. And it follows a big city rom-com author who no longer believes in real life happily ever after. She decides she needs to seek some inspiration, and she does so by drunkenly buying a house and a spot on the town council in a small lake town that needs its own happily ever after. But her true inspiration comes from the very hot and very grumpy, and I do mean grumpy, contractor who is working on her house. Okay, that was a lot of books. But as I have promised, we are going to now discuss a career in writing, aka how do you become an author, or are you just nosy and you want to know how an author gets a book deal? Okay, well, the good news is that if you write, you're a writer. Congratulations. You did it, guys. But because there's always a but to become a published author, that's a whole different other ball game. There are two very common paths to becoming a published author, which I will go through with you now. The first being the traditional path of publishing. This means that we say traditional in the sense of this is kind of like the typical way that you can publish a book. And you publish a book with a publisher like Sourcebooks, where I work. So the traditional path is you write a book. You get your words on paper. You write it and then you rewrite it again and you rewrite it even more. This you want to make your book as good as you possibly can. You can get friends, better beta readers, peers, and so much more to take a look at your book and make it even better. There is a lot of resources online that can help you edit your book. I personally, if you are like, I don't even know where to start with editing or even with writing a book, my favorite thing is Save the Cat Writes a Novel. It's a book by Jessica Brody. You can get it at your local library. I have my own copy because I write in it and I tab a lot. But highly recommend if you are just not sure where to start writing, or you're like, I wrote a book, I don't know if it's any good. That can help you. So once you have your book all finished, you've edited it, you know it's the best it can possibly be. Next, you will need a literary agent to represent your book at the traditional publishers. So traditional publishers do not typically do not typically take on a book by an author unless they are represented by a literary agent. You can kind of think of them as like the gatekeepers, in the sense of they kind of see what's going on in the marketplace. They're like, oh, vampires are really big, thrillers are really big, but I don't really know how I feel about like historical fiction right now. The good news is everything is cyclical, though. If something's not hot right now, it will be in a few years. You can wait. But you can find an agent multiple ways, including but not limited to going to manuscriptwishlist.com. Publisher Marketplace has a website with a listing of a bunch of agents. Even social media is a really great place to find an agent. This time of finding an agent can be kind of harrowing. It can take multiple years and manuscripts to get picked up by an agent. The goal here is persistence. But let's say everything goes perfectly. Your agent oftentimes will help you perfect your book, your pitch, your manuscript, everything you need to take to publishers. And when an agent and an author take their book and present it to publishers, this is often known as the submissions process. Um, so you are basically sending your book, your agent is getting you in the door, and you are sending your book to all of the different publishers, seeing who is interested. If multiple people are interested, there could be like a bidding war. Sometimes you hear about that. Or you can, be like, all right, persuade me. And each publisher will basically try to court you to come to their publisher, and have the honor of publishing your book. Um, so let's say then, yeah, you have that wonderful book. The editor gets excited. As we said earlier, you get an offer. They offer you a publishing contract. That's amazing. You did it. Again, as I said, the contract is very nitty-gritty details, which your agent is very knowledgeable about and can absolutely help you make sure that you get the best deal for you. It's another great thing why an agent is important when it comes to these like very professional traditional publishing route. So from there, the bookmaking happens. The publisher does its work, everything that I showed you earlier on, that timeline. They help you edit, they help you copy proof. They create your book cover, the copy for the back of your book. They send out marketing materials. They create ARCs, which are advanced reader copies. They promote it to librarians, booksellers, educators. They sell your book. They make sure it is in Barnes& and Noble, it is in Target, it is everywhere. They do all that work for you. Until finally the release day comes and your book is out in the world and ready to be read by the masses. Okay, phew, that's a lot. I know I'm dumping a lot of information on you. But that is basically the 6 steps to the traditional path of publishing. Next, we're going to talk about the other common path of publishing, which is self-publishing. You might have heard of it before. It has become increasingly popular in recent years due to its shortened publication schedule. As you remember, I said traditional publishing can take around 2 years. Sometimes it's shorter, but not to the length of self-publishing. And it's also can be very easy to self-publish. Self-publishing is mostly done through Amazon. Um, Oftentimes, I will say, oftentimes a book that is popular on Amazon can then be picked up by traditional publishers to help broaden the distribution of the book. But there's a lot of pros and cons to self-publishing and traditional publishing, which I will go through here. And there are so many articles about this. If you Google and you're like, I'm not sure which way I want to go, a lot of people have a lot of articles that they've written about their experiences, and you can read a little more. But the pros to self-publishing, everything, every dollar you make is 100% yours. That sounds great. Traditional publishing, you typically have royalties. They give you an upfront kind of payment, depending on, how many books you've written. If you're a brand new author, it might be a smaller kind of lump sum payment. But then after kind of you work, your book sells enough to basically cover that, then you start getting royalties throughout the life of the book, which can be a good amount of money, I will say. Um, but with self-publishing, everything 100% of what you make is yours. You get to basically control everything. You can decide what the cover looks like, what the page on Amazon is going to look like, how you're going to pitch your book, how you're going to get your book out there. You get full control. The cons is that you have to control and pay for everything if you self-publish. Traditional publishers, it shouldn't cost you anything to publish a book. Whereas in self-publishing, you have to pay for someone to design the cover. You have to have someone go through and look for your grammatical errors. Someone has to format the book to look like a book. You have to pay for advertising and marketing, and that can quickly become quite expensive. There are cheaper ways to do it, but I know a lot of people who, if they do it, they want to do it well, and they want to make sure they give it the best chance it's got. So they put more money into it. Again, it's like more money you put up front, the more you get out of it. And then also a con, you are limited to distributing on Amazon only. You can't have it at Barnes& and Noble. You can't have it at Target. You can't have it at on any, a lot of libraries won't take it. Booksellers, they might, depending if you have it printed. But so there are some pros to self-publishing, a lot of control, but the cons is you have to pay for everything. For the pros for traditional publishing, you don't have to pay for anything, and you give up control, some control. You still have control. You give up control, but the cons is that you don't have as much control as you might have while self-publishing. Okay, that was a lot of information I dumped on you, and I went a lot faster than I thought I would. So I would love to, I'm just going to take this down, and I would love to chat with you guys. If you guys have questions about publishing, about writing, about any books we have coming out, I am totally happy to have a conversation about it. I see someone has their hand.
You get by with that.
Can you
Okay,
hear
I
Emily?
didn't. No,
Oh.
can you repeat it?
Yeah, so do you have to have an agent or can you get by without having an agent?
Okay, so can you get by without having an agent? It depends. If you want to go to the traditional path of publishing, you will need an agent. If you want, sometimes some publishers will open up to open submissions, and that's going to depend on what that publisher's website says. You can find all that information on there. They typically have a page about submissions, but I would say about 90% of our books that we acquire do have agents. I think I saw some in the chat. Hold on, let me see. Okay, Emmy asked, when you're in the writing process, do you look for an literary agent? I suggest not to. I suggest waiting until you have the book done. And I say that because each agent, like each person, has a different reading preference. So while you're writing it, you might know, hey, I know it's going to be a thriller. But while writing it, things might change. Things might change in editing. And also, you just don't want to put that stress on yourself. Your main goal should be writing the book and finishing the book. And then once you've kind of finished the book and you're like, okay, I have this finished product, I know what it is, then you can start looking for an agent that would be a good fit for your book. And I say another reason I would say to wait is that agents' preferences change on the seasons. You know, maybe in the winter, they're really craving a thriller, but in the summer, they're like, I'm looking for a light and happy, like contemporary. And it really depends. And it can change. So I would wait until you're ready to basically go to agents and contact them in a process called querying. I would wait till your book is done. And then Michelle also asked for romance novels. Sourcebooks accepts unagented submissions per their publishing guidelines. So we currently only take unagented submissions if they are diverse, I believe. We do have a program with our Bloom that we take with our Bloom Books imprint, which has a lot of romance authors. We get authors from Amazon who are really successful. And most of them, I would say like 90% of them, we help them find agents because of the contract negotiations at that point. They kind of need someone. It's like getting, I don't want to say getting sued, but it's like getting sued and like being like, I don't have a lawyer. I'm just not going to have a lawyer. It's like, actually, you kind of probably want a lawyer because they're going to know this process better than you. But I think I know of like 2 Bloom authors that don't have agents, but they are in the process of looking for agents. Are there any other places beside Amazon that you can self-publish? Amazon is, of course, the biggest one that you can self-publish books. And that's going to be the best for discovery. There are websites that you can print your own copies of your books. If you have everything, you can upload it straight into their website, and they will literally print books and send them to you. And like in that sense, you have self-published the book, but you don't have a space to sell them unless you're going to sell them at like sales, like, you know, craft fairs, but books, which I think would be super fun. But Amazon is going to be your primary place where self-publishing is happening now. I haven't really heard of any other spots that do it as widely as Amazon.
Yeah,
Any
we've
other
got
questions?
another question
Yeah.
here.
Is getting an agent like getting a lawyer? Like, do you have to retain, like, is there like a retainment cost?
That's
is it
a
like
good
having,
question.
is it like having a lawyer, like And how do
Not
you
in that
know,
sense.
how do you know you're not getting scammed?
Okay,
Like,
that's
oh,
a
I'm an agent,
great
I'll take a
question.
book someplace, like, and they're on a marketplace. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like, how do you
Yeah.
know who you're working with is legit, and is it like paying an attorney?
Okay.
Because I
So
don't
there's
believe
two.
that they do this stuff for free.
Yeah. Okay, so there's like two questions in there. So I'll start with one. So first question is basically like, do you have to pay an agent? No, you should not have to pay an agent. And maybe me saying that, like, it's kind of like getting a lawyer was a really bad like example. But you do not have to pay an agent. You should never pay an agent. If an agent approaches you and they're like, I'll take your book for like $50 or $500 or however much, run the other way. Um, in the same vein, how do you know that if you're getting scammed? Um, if you are going the traditional route of publishing, so you're trying to get an agent, you're trying to get your book with a publisher, you should not have to pay a dime. And if anyone tries to get money out of you, you run. You run the other way. Because they are taking on your work. The agent is taking on your work, the editor, whoever it is, the publisher is taking on your work in the confidence that your book is going to sell. They see something in your book, they're like, okay, this author has this book, it's going to sell, so we're going to do all of the work for you. Yes, we're going to take a percentage of your royalties, but you're going to still get royalties. You're still going to get a lump sum payment at the beginning when that contract is signed, that they're going to pay you basically for your book, that they basically then have the rights to create a book out of it. So how do you know if you get scammed? Um, there are many things you can do if someone tries to approach you about doing anything. Googling helps. Most professionals who actually are professionals reside on a website called Publishers Marketplace. Um, and the agents there have track records of books that they have sold, and you can check that out. And, if you are researching an agent, you're like, I want to know if this agent is legit. You can go on that website and see if they actually have a track record of selling books. If they don't have a track record on that website, it's very unlikely that they've sold a book before. And then you kind of want to look into their agency. So agents are underneath an umbrella of an agency. So it's kind of like a gosh, I'm going to use the lawyer thing again. This is a really bad example, but you know how lawyers are all under kind of like a associates. They're all in like a company together, and there's like 5 different lawyers in this company. It's kind of similar for agents. They all kind of band together. They all have like an agency that they represent. And you can then go look at the agency. But I think if you're looking at someone, make sure they're legit, make sure that they have actually published books, that they actually work. I think you'll be able to discover pretty quickly, just by Googling their name or their agency, if they have actually done books. And then 2, you should never have to pay anything. Now, if you are self-publishing and you are commissioning, say, a cover designer for a book cover, you will have to pay them. But if you are going agency to publisher route, you shouldn't have to pay. There are scams out there that people are like, oh, I'll publish your book if you give me like $200. They're not legit. They're not, they might print your book, but they're not going to do anything for you. They're just going to take your money and run. I hope that answered your question. If you have follow-up questions, let me know.
I have a question. What are the chances of getting a collection of short stories published? Is there a market for that sort of thing?
I caught the first part of the question. Mary, do you help me
It was,
helping?
yeah, what are the chances of getting a collection of short stories published, and is there a market for that?
Yes. Okay, so short answer, yes. Short stories, there's a couple different ways you can go about publishing short stories. There are many magazines that still do short story publications. And again, you can just do some Googles about, like whether it's science fiction short story or it's like a contemporary fiction or a nonfiction, whatever it may be. You can search that and be like short story publishing magazines or newspapers that do that. That is one way. I know a lot of people who get started just by writing short stories and publishing them on the internet and with news outlets to basically give them kind of a ground. Now, short story collections is another thing. I would say collections of short stories are more attractive to publishers because they know that you are actually serious about it. You're not just writing one short story and then you're going to skedaddle. They're like, no, this person is serious about it. They've written like 10 short stories or 5 or what have you. And collections can be, they're collected into more of a book size. So then they can actually publish that, print that, put that in bookstores, and people are more interested in reading short story collections. There's absolutely a market for it. I hear it all the time. There are agents out there who deal exclusively with short story collections. There are some publishers who, publish more than others. Sourcebooks, personally, we don't publish a lot of short story collections. We have in the past, but I know a lot of publishers who publish a lot of them. Um, Benchmarks for success, I believe you asked about. Um, if you're interested in publishing a short story collection, I mean, it's going about the same kind of route, is writing them, of course, and then going through them, editing them, making sure that the collection is the best you can be, and then, searching out those agents that are interested in reading short story collections and are interested in representing you. And they're the ones who are going to know what publishers are going to be best for a short story collection. Um, I hope that answers your question. Um,
Partly, yeah. So would it be better to, send the manuscript to one of these magazines like Hippocampus or, Writing Disorder that publishes, short story collections? Or is
well,
it better to get an agent, find an agent?
I see your question. I guess that depends based on what you're more interested in. If you have one short story that you're really excited about, and you don't need an agent to go to these newspapers, these websites, these people who publish short stories. You don't need any of that. You can just go to them and submit directly. You don't need an agent. If you have multiple and you're like, hey, it makes sense that this would create a collection of short stories, absolutely, you are welcome to go and try to find an agent. I guess it depends on how you feel, though. Or do you want to create a collection out of these short stories, or would you rather, submit them to an online magazine or a newspaper or something? Um, you know, it's really personal preference. And I know, there's a lot of people who have done similar things, and I'm sure you could find articles about people who have published um, short story collections and kind of see what they've done. Um, but I will say, if you wanted to um, publish in an online news article, magazine, what have you, you would then, and then later you wanted to go to an agent, you would be able to do that. Once you do one, you aren't like siloed forever, right? A lot of independent authors who self-publish later go to TradPub. I know some traditional published authors who decide to self-pub on the side. So your options are not cut off once you decide one way or the other. Um, I hope that helps. Emmy does have one in the chat. What does the querying process look like when finding an agent? Gosh, where do I start? So maybe I start with querying. So querying is another word basically for going to find an agent. And I like to think of it as a job interview. You're essentially applying to jobs. And you're applying to these agents that they will take your book on. And you have this thing called a query letter that you send the agents. Basically, it's like a one-page letter that talks about what your book is, who you are, and that is what you send to agents. I like to think of the query letter as a cover letter, but for your book or your short story or whatever have you. It can take some time. It is not the most fun thing to do. I say that from personal experience. You get to hear no a lot, but the hope is that you hear one yes. Again, it's like, applying for a job. You apply widely. You're like, hey, I think I'm a good fit for this agent or, this job. I'm going to apply. And then you wait. And sometimes you can wait for many moons to hear if they are interested in reading more or if, they're like, hey, this isn't the right fit for me. A lot of it is very dependent on, what the agent is looking for at that moment. They might have just heard a little birdie, AKA the publisher, being like, we're looking specifically for a vampire romance set in the 1930s. And the agent will be like, great, I'll look and see if anyone has submitted anything like that. So it can be disheartening at times to query and to hear no a lot, but it is also very good to get yourself out there, to start learning the space, learning about these agents and their agencies. You kind of learn how to craft a better and better query letter. It's all a process. There's so many articles and podcasts you can listen to about querying, so I'm not going to talk your socks off. But it's a time. There's a reason why it's called the trenches. It's called the query trenches. So that's a lot of fun. I say
So it's
sarcastically.
one of the magazines that publishes collections of
What are
stories.
they?
Accepts it. Would they promote it to the same extent as having an agent for it?
Mary, what was the second half of that?
Yeah, so if a magazine that publishes short stories accepts it, will they promote it to the same extent as an agent would? Did I get
I
that?
mean, it depends on the magazine or the newspaper. They will definitely, if they were to accept it, typically they will pay. Typically it's not as big as what a publisher might pay, but they will pay you for the for publishing the article, and they will promote it to their kind of following and their understandings. And the people who read that article, newspaper, what have you. An agent promotes it to publishers, and the publishers have a wider reach, I will say, just because, again, they're the ones that get meetings with Target and Walmart and Barnes and Noble. So they definitely have a wider reach, where I feel like online, you can get a huge reach from online, but that is just online only. Yes.
Okay, that helps.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Any other questions?
Should you, I'd like to know, should you copyright your book before you start sending it to people? Because how do you know that they're not gonna decide some other author should write your book? Like, so should you copyright your work before you go sending it to people?
I would highly suggest it. So, There are some instances where writers can submit a work to an agent or publisher on what they call a proposal, which is kind of like the query letter, a cover letter, basically being like, here's the book I want to write, and here's what it is about. I will say that that is almost exclusively only for established authors who have written multiple books before, and they can then submit to other publishers a proposal, be like, hey, I have this great track record, so you know I can write a book. You know I can write a book well. Here's kind of what I'm thinking about for writing a book. And then that publisher can select it. I think the biggest example is Fourth Wing, that book by Rebecca Yarros. Rebecca Yarros wrote that book on proposal. She went to her publisher who had published like 10 of her books up to that point. She said, hey, I want to do something different. I want to write this fantasy novel. It's going to have dragons. It's going to be a war college, and there's going to be romance. And I haven't written it yet, but I think you should buy it. And the publisher went, sounds great, let's do it. And then it became one of the biggest books. But she was only able to do that because she had like 10 books with that publisher ahead of time. They knew her, they knew that she was good for it. So yes, unfortunately for new authors, you have to have the book written before you get any publisher attention or agent attention. And basically, yeah, you just have to like establish yourself first.
I think the question too was about whether you should copyright a work before submitting it so that you're protecting your ideas.
Oh, copyright. Okay. Well, here's a great thing. All right, so you're getting a little bit of my like college education today. This is exciting. I'm using my degree. I did not go to degree for this, by the way. But I took a copywriting class that was needed for my degree. And fun fact that once you write something down on paper and it's tangible, specifically tangible, it is copywritten. It is protected under the copyright law. So I know of a lot of people who have written a book and then they have printed it out and basically dated it. And there you go. It's protected by copyright. And you can then, if any legal proceedings were to come about, you can be like, hey, look, it's tangible. It's right here. It says in the copyright law, if it is tangible, it is protected under copyright. Now, a lot of people will go and register their copyright material with the US government. And this is just essentially that is just a way to have like a receipt essentially and be like, hey, it is copywritten. Someone else laid eyes on it, essentially, laid eyes on it. And I have this receipt that it is protected by copyright. So I don't think you need to worry about sending it out to agents if it is uncopywritten, legally uncopywritten. Especially if you have done your research and you know that those agents are legitimate. They actually have sales to their names. They actually work in the publishing community. Again, if someone asks you for money, run the other way. I don't think it is necessary for a beginning writer to copyright their work. A lot of people in the industry are very protective of your work, and publishers will do that copyright process for you. So you don't have to worry about it and will register it for you. But essentially it's already copywritten what sits down in tangible. But if you are worried about it, you can absolutely get it copywritten, but it's not necessary. And I haven't heard any horror stories about that being a problem that someone has come up against. Typically, everyone in the publishing industry is very protective of your work. I hope that answered the question.
I mean,
Sorry, I misheard part of it.
I've heard of people, because they say, well, you could have done it afterwards. So I've heard of people that print it out, they get it notarized, they certify mail it to themselves,
Yeah.
get the receipt from the post office, and then they
Yep.
never open it. So then if something comes up later, they can then go to court and say, this envelope is not open, here's the
Yeah.
receipt. Here, and in there is my notarized copy of what I wrote. So
Yeah.
I don't know if people have done that.
They call that like the poor man's copyright, because it does cost some money to copyright your material. And so sending it to yourself and having it dated is um, a thing that some people do. Again, unnecessary. If it's tangible, if you have written it, if your name's on it, it's already protected under the copyright law. If someone were to plagiarize, worst case scenario, if someone were to plagiarize some of your work, all you would have to prove is that you had it before them, and you would be able to be like, look, I have it right here. I worked on it in 2017, and look, I wrote a date on here, and you can like carbon date it if you want, but copyright proceedings are not as terrible. I feel like some people are like really, really scared of having their things stolen, but it's quite more straightforward than you would think it is. But yes, the poor man's copyright. I love that example. We learned all about it in class, and if that makes you feel better, I mean, do it. Like everything is going to be everything you do in while writing or publishing, that is all just like do what feels right. Go with your gut instinct. Okay, any other questions?
Is there companies that do children's books better than other companies?
Ooh, I mean, well, each company is going to have an opinion. Like, we at Sourcebooks are going to be like, well, I think we do the best children's books. I would say there are so many publishers who do children's books, more than I would say adult. Um, there's a lot of smaller publishers who do children's books as well, or mid-sized publishers that do children's books well. But again, if you're thinking of going kind of like the agented route, where you're going to get an agent and then you are going to submit it to publishers, the agent is going to know. They're going to have that experience. They're going to look at your book, be like, okay, I think your book is going to be the best fit with this and this and this publisher. And then they are going to be like, we're going to submit your book to them first because your book is going to fit perfectly with this publisher.
Sure.
And you'll have those conversations with your agent, like, what do you want out of a publisher? You know, they're going to be able to help you navigate what publisher is best for you. It's not really what publisher does things better, because we all do great things, but it's like, what's best for you? Again, gut instinct. Go with your gut.
How much does the publisher's marketplace cost?
So Publishers Marketplace, there's a free version and then there's a subscription version. It's not obscene, like an obscene price. But my recommendation is once you are ready to query, you have the book ready and you're looking for agents, purchase a month, like $10, purchase a month to make sure that all of the agents that you're looking at are legit. They have they have sales, you know, make sure that they are still working in the industry. Um, and so, and then from there, you can absolutely you can like cancel it. So then you just like have it for a month, use it, and then lose it. That's what I suggest.
Can you tell agents specialties, you know, like thrillers?
Yes. Yeah, so there's this great, it'll say often on the publisher's marketplace page for an agent. Another really great website that's actually free is manuscriptwishlist.com. And you can do a search based on agents, based on what they acquire. So there are some agents that only acquire children's books, some just acquire romance or mystery or what have you. And you can look and see what their preferences are on their website, and kind of make a list, and then find out, how do they want you to submit your book and kind of go from there. But yes, they do have all like profiles or bios where they tell you kind of what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I mean, if you think of questions later, they do, the lovely librarians who set this up have my email. And you're more than welcome to email me, and I will try to answer you in a concise manner that makes sense. I know I mumble and I ramble on a little bit. But I mean, I hope I have been helpful and enlightening.
Thank you so much, Emily.
You're
This
so
has
welcome.
been very enlightening. I know I've learned a lot. Yeah, thank you so much. Just Kata, thank you. I was gonna say, there's another question, but
No, you're good.
Yeah, we have.
yeah, if you want to get in touch, you can reach out to me or to Kayla.
Yeah.
And we can reach out to Emily. Super. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing your evening
you.
with us. We really
Thank you
appreciate
guys
it.
for listening. It was great. All right.
Thanks all for joining online or in person.
Thank
All
you
right.
all. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.